And most oil from, most gas, for example, the largest producer of gas in the world is Qatar, in the Gulf, in the Arabian, Persian Gulf. And they export to the Far East, all liquefaction. They have a liquefying plants, they liquefy huge tankers, take the liquefied gas as in liquid form to Japan, China, and so forth. Then it's liquefied, and there's a huge demand. Australia, an Australian company, also showed interest in the Israeli gas. Woodside, it's called Woodside, one of a large player in this field. So for Israel, this is a new game changer, perhaps. And as I said today to somebody, I said perhaps people said always that Moses made a mistake when he went to Canaan, because there was nothing there, and maybe God wanted him to go elsewhere.
Maybe he didn't. Maybe.
Well, yeah, they said the joke is that, you know, of course, Moses was stuttering, you know, and God said go to, and he thought Canaan, but actually God wanted him to go to California, and he made a mistake, so he went to Canaan, but now it turns out it was not such a big mistake. So maybe we have also some natural resources, and I think it's very important for Israel. It's a real blessing, and it was a great day last month when Tamar started flowing gas to the electricity company, which now about half of the electricity generation is by gas, which is also much better for the environment. So environmental organizations in Israel are very happy with this, with the gas input, and they talk about cars going on gas, and so, which in some countries already happened. In Australia, cars go on gas, taxis go on gas, and so forth. It's a very friendly, cheaper fuel than other, certainly coal or oil, and so for Israel this is a great thing, great change.
What will be the political implications of this discovery of gas?
Well, it makes, first of all, Israel somewhat independent energetically. It's always good for a country like Israel to be less dependent on other countries. Although we never had difficulties. For example, we import oil from Mexico, so there was never a political difficulty in that. But it's still, to be energetically independent is good. As I said, also it has very positive environmental effects in Israel, and the environmental groups are very happy because the coal port in Caesarea is creating some pollution and so forth, and there are some concerns about the environmental impact. I think also the gas, and I'm shifting now from Israel to the world, the fact that the U.S. is becoming now the largest producer of gas in the world because of the shale, the fracking. The price of gas in the U.S. is now very low, $3, and people talk about exporting. The U.S. is now undergoing the same debate that Israel is undergoing. How much should they allow exporting gas? Again, the environmental organization in the U.S. have a position on that. It's a huge political debate in the U.S. how much gas to allow to export. But in any case, the U.S. will be less dependent on Middle East oil. Mm. And this will have political implications in the Middle East in the long run. There's no question about that. Other implications are related to our neighbors, because we had an agreement with Egypt, but since the so-called the Arab Spring, and they blew up 13 times the pipeline that went from Egypt to Israel, they stopped. We have no more agreement. Egypt revoked the contract that they had with Israel. They are still flowing gas to Jordan, but not to Israel. Jordan is completely dependent on Egyptian gas. By the way, it would make a lot of sense for Israel to ship gas to Jordan, but politically I think Jordan would like that. But politically in the Arab world, Jordan cannot afford to have an agreement with Israel on that kind of thing, it seems. But then Lebanon and Cyprus have found gas. Lebanon is in the process now of outsourcing this to large The large players which didn't come to Israel because of fear of the Arab boycott, Exxon and BP and others are all competing in Lebanon to get a piece of the action. And it's good. For Israel, this is very good. If Lebanon will also have gas deposits and will supply the Arab world too, will supply itself, and will also ship to Europe, for Israel it's good because we'll have mutual interests in preserving. Once you have economic interest in both sides, everyone wants to keep the peace, not to disturb it. So organizations such as Hezbollah, who are threatening Israel's deposits from time and again, will have to be careful because Lebanon itself will have the gas. I think it will have a positive effect on Lebanon too, to be moderate and to be more peaceful and reduce the power that Hezbollah has currently and making noise. We have very good relations with Cyprus, so the gas from Cyprus is very welcome. In fact, Israel is considering to have the liquefying plant perhaps on site in Cyprus and then ship it to Europe in liquefied form. There's some considerations of security. The people in Israel, some security defense people say, no, it's better to have it in Israel, not in another country. There are various considerations. But we have an agreement with Cyprus, and there's no legal problem. All our deposits are less than halfway between Israel and Cyprus, and the Cypriot deposits are on their side. We have no dispute, we have an agreement. With Lebanon, there's some Hezbollah and Lebanon made some noise that Leviathan crossed the line, but the lawyers, the legal people tell me that this is not a serious issue. Israel is well within its economic waters.
Mm. And I heard that they also found oil deposits.
No, not yet. There are signs of oil.
Yes?
There are signs of oil. Noble Energy estimates that there are 20-25% chance that there is oil under Tamar and under Leviathan.
Ah.
This is deeper,
Yes.
so it will require more deeper digs. But if it will happen and there is oil there, that's a different. Then we'll be members of a different club altogether. That's a more distinguished club. The money will be different order of magnitude. Oil is much easier. It has one price, ship it at demand all over the world. So we'll see. We'll see. It's a fair chance.
Yes. How did this adventure start? This gas found. Well, how were they found, and why did they call it Tamar and Leviathan? This is
a nice question, actually, a relevant one. Let me start with the end, the last question. Tamar. Leviathan is because of the biblical name Leviathan, but Tamar and another one, Noah and Dorit, are named after the daughters
Noah
of Noah and Dalit and Noah and Tamar. These are all the granddaughters of a friend of mine, a geologist who found these deposits.
Ah.
Yossi Langotsky is his name, an Israeli, who for years, and he brought in first British gas. And it was first owned by British Gas, but then they had, from their own reasons, they gave it to the Israeli company now, to Noble Energy and to Delek. For strategic reason. By the way, yeah, I should mention, it's very important for Israel too. Another deposit was found across from Gaza. It's called Mari. There was a fairly large deposit across from Gaza. Up to now, Israel has not, this is still owned by British Gas. Up to now, Israel has not allowed this deposit to be developed because they thought the money will go to Hamas in Gaza, and they have not allowed. But in the future, if there is an agreement, and hopefully there will be between Israel and the Palestinians, this could be a source of revenue for the Palestinians, which is much more important than even for Israel. They are in a much lower economic level, and for them, this money that will come in from the gas across from Gaza is very important. So hopefully in the future, this could also be a bridge for peace, if they have an interest in developing the gas and will be revenue which the Palestinians need even more than Israel. In fact, quite a bit, given their low standard of living. So I think it has enormous positive effects on Israel. But back to your question about why was it named? So I said Tamar and Dalit and Noah are the granddaughters of the Israeli geologist who found them. The whole thing started, to go back to the history, the U.S. Geological Survey was carried out in the 1990s in the eastern basin of the Mediterranean. And they have found out with seismic samples underwater that the shape of the ground there is very promising for gas and oil. So this report came out, and this was the first inkling that maybe something good is under the water, deep water. And as I said, then British Gas started looking for, and they found first Mari B, young Tethys across from Ashkelon in the year 2000, then Tamar, then Leviathan. So the whole thing started with, and Egypt found, of course, large gas deposits, and Egypt exported gas to Israel, no more. So the whole thing started with this finding by the U.S. Geological Survey.
And I heard they had some problems with Noble Energy for the taxes and.
Well, of course, nobody likes that money will be taken from him, and this is the same all over the world. The fights about the rents that the government wants to take all over the world are the fiercest and the most vehement and aggressive fights. Noble Energy, which already has been extracted gas from this deposit near Ashkelon in the south, in Tethys, for 7 years, when they heard that the committee is going to be established, the committee that I was chair of, started enlisting lobbyists in the U.S. Among them was Bill Clinton, ex-President Bill Clinton, and some prominent Jews like Stu Eisenstadt, who was a prominent Jewish lawyer in Washington, D.C., Deputy Minister of the Treasury, of the State, Deputy Minister, Secretary of State, sorry, Deputy Secretary of State, Stu Eisenstadt for some years. I think it was under some Democrat. Anyway, they all became lobbyists for Noble Energy and wrote to the Israeli Prime Minister and to the Chancellor of the Bank of Israel, Stanley Fisher, that Israel should be very careful. The relations with the U.S. will be problematic if we tax down Noble Energy. Well, we had hearings. Noble Energy is quite happy with the tax. They stayed in Israel. We said jokingly, you know, if you're unhappy, why don't you sell Israel your share in the gas of Israel? Whatever you invested will give you with a nice profit. Do you want to sell it to us? I said, no. Still very good. Even after the taxes that Israel imposed, the Sheshinsky tax, we're still making a very handsome profit.
And what's new in the energetic sector of Israel?
Well, as I said, the major...
Because Israel has always been like a pioneer in all kind of energy for the world, solar energy.
Yes, we still are. We have various firms who are involved in solar energy, the firms who operate in California. We have a large, an Israeli corporation which had a large project in California. This has changed because the Americans gave subsidy for solar energy, and now the subsidy has stopped. But Israel is still a major producer of solar energy. Now they talk about other things like electric car. Israel tries, everybody tries, and the Chinese probably eventually will be ahead of everybody else. They can do it cheaper and have a larger market. But Israel on the energy side is still doing some explorations about alternative green energy, recycling, providing into energy. And already there's a plant that was near Tel Aviv. There was a large garbage dump called Chiria, and the largest in Israel. This was converted into a park, and underneath is a plant to create energy. The garbage creates gases, and this creates energy, and Israel is using it now for creation of energy for the plants in the neighborhood, in the area.